Hello, thank you all for joining us for this discussion about finding solutions to the Boise area's affordable housing crisis. I'm Rachel Spacek, the local government reporter for the Idaho Statesman. I am part of a team that has been looking into the factors driving our skyrocketing rents in the Treasure Valley, especially for low to moderate income and working class Idahoans. We have been telling the stories of individuals, families with kids, seniors on fixed income, and others who are struggling through this crisis in our series called Affording Boise over the last month and a half. So just briefly, a little bit what we found there. Boise area renters have watched their rents increase dramatically, at least in the last 2 years. The median cost for a one-bedroom apartment in Boise is now $1,026 a month, and it's about $1,200 for a two-bedroom. And overall, the median rent for an apartment of any size has increased by 34.1% since March of 2020, according to Apartment List. And one of the factors we've seen are low vacancy rates for rentals in Ada County and Canyon counties because of a shortage of affordable housing in both counties. So this afternoon, we are going to be hearing from 3 people in our community who work on different areas of the problem to share what they're seeing and discuss ways to tackle the affordability problem. So today we have with us Boise City Councilwoman Lisa Sanchez, herself a renter. She is in her second term. She built her campaign on and now works at the forefront of shaping city policy around renters' rights in Boise and spearheaded an ordinance to prevent property managers and landlords from charging exorbitant rental application fees. We also have with us developer Clay Carley, who is Boise born and raised. He is behind several downtown apartment projects, including the Oahe, which preserved the historic integrity of the 1900s Oahe Hotel, the Gibson Home 2 Suites, and the Lucy developments, all in downtown Boise, and 6th and Grove, which is being built as an affordable housing development. We also have with us Deanna Watson, the executive director of the Boise City Ada County Housing Authorities, an organization that provides assistance to people seeking affordable housing through Section 8 vouchers, emergency rental assistance, and other programs. So welcome, everyone. So I will start off with a couple questions of my own, and we'll go into some questions that readers submitted on our website. So first, I mentioned the low vacancy rate for rentals. I just wanted to ask, what are other issues that you all are seeing that are driving the rent affordability problem in our area? I was thinking maybe, Deanna, you could answer that one first.
Thank you. Well, I think we have seen really kind of a perfect storm happen to Boise, Idaho. If you think back to 2017, 2019, all the different publications that rated Boise as the best city to live in, and the population change that we've seen as a result of that. I think I saw that we had 194% more move in than move out over the last couple of years. So we have the population surge into our area. We had the downturn in 2008-ish when building kind of slowed down to a crawl, and it has not reached back to the level that it needed to be to produce the number of units that we need, especially considering the population growth of our area. And then there's just the lack of local resources enabled that have not been enabled by the state legislature that other states have in terms of local and state housing trust funds. I know Idaho just passed a $50 million trust fund with federal money. So far, it looks like one-time funds, but that's for 80% of median income and above. Where we see the biggest issues are with those who really need subsidy to help them pay their rent, as we see the rents jump by 30%. I think in the last year, the national average is 15. From 2015 to 2020, it was 4%. So we just have a perfect storm set of circumstances here that is hitting our lower income families especially hard. And those are some of the other factors. Airbnbs being, what used to be rentals converted to vacation rentals, high construction costs. It's just you think of all the factors and all of them are pretty bad.
Clay or Lisa, did you want to jump in to highlight any other issues driving the problem?
Yeah, I think I would just add from the development standpoint that land prices in the valley generally have gone up 250% in the last 10 years, which is outrageous, but it's real. And construction costs have gone up 40% in the last 5 years. So when Deanna says we didn't have enough stock to begin with, she's right. When she said that existing stock is being used for short-term rentals, that's correct. And the replacement cost for new product is extremely expensive and high. So that just means that anybody looking for a place to live is going to be paying close to 100% more than they would have 10 years ago.
Okay.
I would say, Rachel, I would say part of it too is the developments that folks have been building have also been targeted towards folks with higher incomes. So that's also a part of it as well. And that's why states, municipalities have to ensure that we have affordable housing for those folks who do not have the income to meet those higher rates. It's unfortunate that Idaho is a state that has very low incomes that have not kept pace with the increased cost of living in our state. So as Deanna said, it's a perfect storm. We have so many different issues that all intersect to make it very difficult, especially for our folks who are renters.
Yeah, I'd like to add, Lisa's right. A majority of the new product being built is built for higher income people. But the reason for that is the subsidies required to build for even 80% of AMI, much less 30% of AMI. So that's the area median income. It's a measure of cost of housing to your income. The subsidy required today for apartments or housing to find a home for someone that's 80% of area median income is 40%. So I'm sure that most out there don't understand that a newly built apartment today costs about $350,000 to build. So when you walk in a 600 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment, it's really a $350,000 home at cost. So the rents or the sell price, if it's a for sale product, have to be extraordinarily high and well above 80% AMI. So the only way a developer can build to the 80% AMI target is with somebody else's money that's free and does not have to be paid back. And it's 40%. It's a huge number. The $50 million the state has allocated might generate 300 units statewide, which really doesn't put a dent on where we're going.
And I might just tag on to what Clay just said. When you look at the other states in the United States of America and the tools that they have created to provide assistance, subsidy, free money, like Clay said, for affordable housing, if you were to look at that across the 50 states, Idaho is the one and only state that doesn't have any tools in its column. We have local option taxes, but only for cities that are considered resort cities. We can't do local option tax by local government. We aren't enabled by the state legislature to create local trust funds at the city or county or other jurisdiction level. And the state housing trust fund that's been in existence since 1992 has never had a penny put in it. So the funds, the 50 million, the one-time kind of funds that Clay just mentioned, maybe 300 units, represent a tiny drop in the bucket of what's needed. And the lack of tools that we have to produce affordable housing is making our perfect storm just a disaster.
Well,
Let me add one more quickly.
yeah, of
Deanna's
course.
exactly right. One of the main tools that I've seen other states use to stimulate housing, whether it's market rate or workforce or affordable, is tax abatement. So if you're a buyer, the property tax entity, in our case, the counties, would abate the property tax for some restricted period of time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the incentive necessary would be, and also for development of multifamily property tax abatement. So I just finished a tax credit project. It's the lowest income housing that we can provide for downtown where most of the jobs are. And yet I'm going to have to pay full property tax bill every year on that property, which is 45% of our operating cost. And our income is 1/5 of what the rate should be.
Well, you all kind of touched on what some things our elected officials on the state level can do. Any ideas on what is, what people on the city level can do for renters struggling to afford and retain their homes? Lisa, I was thinking you could speak to this about, maybe what the city of Boise is doing or what they can do.
Yeah, so as we all know, especially over the last couple of years, housing is a social determinant of health. To be able to rest and be safe every day, it should be a basic human need that we provide. And so, at the city of Boise, we have a strong and clear public purpose to invest in creating affordable housing to all residents. Healthy neighborhoods have housing prices at all points. We shouldn't have a good part of town and a not good part of town. Anyone should be able to live anywhere in Boise and have a high quality of life. So Boise residents who need affordable homes are often the most marginalized, and market rate housing development, as we know, is far outpacing housing development, affordable housing development, because as Clay said, without subsidy, affordable housing is too expensive to build. So without a targeted intervention, we will not be able to change this trend. And the city does not have the financial resources available to fill the entire affordable housing gap, which is why the city must highly target the resources that it does have and prioritize to invest in housing that serves households earning below 60% AMI and those without homes, where the greatest need for homes exists. The city has created a housing investment program that focuses on producing affordable housing and preserving affordable housing. And the city is also prioritizing all eligible federal funding sources to help create affordable housing.
Okay. Any thoughts, Deanna and Clay, about work on the city level?
Yeah, one quick comment. So the land trust is important. Free land for a new project does mean something, but it's about at most 10% of the project cost. And as I said, we need 4% subsidization. So eliminating permit fees, that's about 1%. I don't know what else the city could do other than help pay rent through vouchers. So if the city can provide free land and not charge for permitting, it still gets you about 25% of the way towards full subsidization.
And I would just want to add, if you think about what the poverty rate is in Ada County, it's probably over 30,000 households. And then you look at, so they would have a need for housing assistance to meet, certainly even a year ago, what the levels were, more so now. We receive enough funding. We administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program for all the communities in Ada County. We serve about 2,500 families every month under a housing assistance program contract, where we enter into a relationship with the landlord and the tenant. So we are short funded by probably 29,000 to 27,000 vouchers if we were going to try to serve all the people that have that need. That's a federally funded program. I think sometimes people think it works like food stamps, as in if you qualify, you get the voucher, but it's annually appropriated by Congress. And even though we're in existing contracts for the 2,500, we have to watch what we're spending on each one, because if we go over our budgeted amount, as we would be in this market, they will reduce the number of vouchers we have for future use. So it's a difficult situation to be in. There's also the cap on what we can pay. That is kind of tightly lidded by the federal government and is not a reflection of current market conditions. So it helps some, 2,500, but it certainly is just a drop in the bucket of what's needed. I think the city's doing everything it can within its resources and within the cutbacks that are made at the state level. Lisa's application fee ordinance that the state legislature didn't like and has now changed, just make our little steps in progress now steps backward.
Just like everything, we've kind of touched on this, but we've talked about the governor's $50 million for workforce housing. And Clay, you were recently interviewed by Boise Dev about the low-income housing tax program to encourage developers to build affordable housing. But based on that story and that interview, that seems like just a start. Any ideas on how these funding strategies help, and what could be done on the federal level maybe for these, or just issues with the programs that do exist?
Well, I'm a firm believer that all problems are local and all solutions should be as localized as possible. And Deanna's already mentioned that local option tax would give us a tool that provides the community with the opportunity to support affordable housing to whatever level they feel comfortable. To look to the federal government and federal taxpayers, or even the state and out of areas, state taxpayers, to subsidize our housing issues isn't the best solution. The best solution is localized. As an odd comparison, and it's an extreme one, Vienna, Austria has a budget for affordable housing of $600 million each year. $600 million a year for a city of 1.8 million people, which is about the size of the state of Idaho. And our federal tax credit program is about $5 or $6 million a year. So it's not even close. And Lisa can tell you what the city's budget is for housing. It's a drop in the bucket. So I'm not saying we should be Vienna, Austria, but we are so under supported financially, and we need a tool to allow each community in our state to go to vote and decide through sales tax, do we want to support more housing or do we not?
And I might just add a little piece of good news that's going to be bad news soon. Under the Treasury program, we have been administering a program called Emergency Rental Assistance for folks in Ada County. Idaho Housing has been administering it for the balance of state. There's a couple of Native American tribes that also have some funds. In 10 months, we have expended $28 million. Well, that's 12 months. So in 1 year, we've spent $28 million, almost $29 million in paying rental assistance to families up to 80% of area median income. We have enough funding probably to go about another year, maybe a little bit longer, depending on some reallocation that might be happening. When that money runs out, we will not have produced one more unit of affordable housing. And the rent assistance that has been really shoring up what we're dealing with will back away. And I have a major concern about what happens at that point.
Yeah, and Deanna, you mentioned the rental application fee ordinance, to help our renters who were for a good while being taken advantage of at the rental application phase. I do believe HB 442, which is the legislature's recent attempt to, again, further strip the city of Boise's tool to help protect renters. I do believe it did not get a Senate hearing. So we are saved for at least another year, I think, of being able to offer that tool to our renters. But as far as the resources and what the city can do, right now we are focusing our resources on the folks who are most in need, and inviting the private market to help solve the need for more moderate income households. So right now the city's primary tools to combat supply and demand is the city's zoning code, which should enable a variety of housing types to help increase supply. So as you know, we are reworking that. So although the city will directly invest in affordable housing for low-income households and for residents exiting homelessness, the city must also enable the private market, so that's developers and residents, to participate in producing a wide range of housing types and therefore levels of affordability. The goal of increasing our housing supply is the key to ensure the often referenced missing middle of housing types and workforce or middle income housing level of affordability is adequately accounted for. And so increasing the housing supply prevents displacement of people from their neighborhoods and alleviates the negative impacts of gentrification. I myself happen to live in a duplex, and something that we don't talk about is the disruption of community when we have folks displaced. I have lived in this duplex, this summer will be 10 years. And I don't know if you folks have ever lived in that type of a housing product, but I, as a single woman, I love it. I love living in a duplex because I share a laundry room with my duplex neighbor. And I think over the period of 10 years, I've had 5 different folks live in the other duplex, and every single one of them has been lovely. And what happens when you live in this type of a housing situation, you have an experience of being more than neighbors, but not quite roommates. And I have really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed living in my neighborhood. And I think about what people talk about in Boise, what attracts people to our community. And we've often heard our city described as a place of kindness where people are nice. Well, that is not something that just happens. That's something that we create and that we prioritize as a value in our community. And so when we have folks displaced from housing that they've been in a long time, we're disrupting those community connections that people have. I know for myself, having lived through the last recession, when you don't have money, when you don't have the usual resources, you turn to your community. And it's not always programs that you turn to your friends and your neighbors. And when people have to leave their neighborhoods to find more affordable housing, oftentimes it means people with these values leave our community. And that's something that we haven't really discussed a lot, but I think it's also something important for us to consider.
Absolutely. So now we'll hear some reader questions. This one, again, we've touched on it, but I think maybe if Clay or Deanna wanted to elaborate, this is about the supply and demand issue. So Lindsay, who lives on the Boise bench, wants to know what are some of the tools that housing authorities, government entities, etc., can use to help combat the supply and demand issue of housing and building materials, I'm assuming. So Deanna, maybe?
Okay, I'm sure Clay will fill in all the gaps that I leave, but we mentioned low-income housing tax credit funds, and that's a great tool, but it is not funded to the level that we need it to be. And without the other funds to augment what the costs are above and beyond what the tax credits can provide, it's still very, very difficult to put a project together that will help people at the need level that people experience. There's funding at the federal government level, like our Section 8 voucher program. There's been some proposals to do universal vouchers, which would dramatically increase the number of vouchers that housing authorities would have to at least make a difference in what the tenant portion of the rent is. But that is not showing signs at this point of being favored for passage. Certainly the Rescue Act funds have provided an infusion of funds to help intensely for a period of time, but those are not sustainable funds that would be needed to go forward. So the lack of funding at the federal level, the lack of tools at the local level, and I agree with Clay, the more we can keep our addressing our programs at the local level, the more we can craft what we're doing to meet the needs that are particular to our locale. But there just aren't enough tools, even for the states that have all the tools, and there certainly are not enough in a state that doesn't elect to have any of those tools.
Yeah, I would add this, that number one, Boise and probably the other municipalities in Ada County or Canyon County are very strong in their neighborhood participation. And they're very passionate about where they live, and they're very concerned about increased density, and they're worried about ADUs, and they're worried about the character of their neighborhoods being ruined by increased density. Our new planning director at the city of Boise just told us that Atlanta grew from 400 to 500,000 people, the city limits, in the last 20 years, and the surrounding area went from 1.8 million to 6 million. So that's sprawl. And the only thing worse than sprawl in most people's thinking is higher density. But we don't want sprawl. We can't afford sprawl. And we have to have higher density. And the solution for higher density is good design. That comes first from zoning. And the city's doing a rewrite right now in zoning. And I hope the other municipalities in our region do the same, because good design will yield good results. And people will be pleased, they'll actually be happy and embrace higher density and growth with good design. So with a new zoning rule and process that makes sense, that works, and we have an expert that can help us get there, and a process that's certain. Neighborhoods love to oppose new development. But if developers try to build somewhere with it being uncertain on the outcome, then the costs go up and the product deteriorates. It becomes a worse product. So good zoning, good process will yield good development and proper higher density that our community will really enjoy. And I can list a half a dozen great examples of projects that were highly contested prior to completion. And now that they're complete, there isn't a neighbor that thinks it was a mistake or a bad idea. And I'll just leave it at that.
Mitchell and Boise actually asked, how do you envision zoning changes helping to address housing density in Boise? So unless Lisa, if you wanted to add anything on zoning, I'll just skip to that question.
Yeah, I can take that. So changes to the city's dated zoning code, they can help to facilitate the development of more housing. So currently the city zoning code has numerous regulatory barriers, some that I think Clay referred to earlier, that limit or they encumber the ability for the private market to respond to increasing housing demand on limited available land. And so these limitations include large minimum lot sizes, height limits, and arbitrary density limits. So additionally, the zoning code often makes it impossible the ability to develop lower cost housing types, such as accessory dwelling units, missing middle housing, such as duplexes and fourplexes, and multifamily housing. So revisions to the zoning code can remove barriers that often limit housing supply and or increase the cost to build a variety of housing types at all price points. So that's what we're hoping to do. And we've been doing a lot of community outreach to ensure that neighborhoods throughout the city are able to hear from our staff what the changes will be, and also invite them to ask questions and to let us know what their concerns are. But Clay is correct. People don't like to have their lives disrupted. They are comfortable with what they know, but the reality is we do live in a city, and we are constantly evolving, and the reality is, it is growing. We have people coming, and we are behind in our housing stock. So we're hoping that these updated zoning codes will help us with our density. As Clay said, we want to avoid sprawl. For those of us who have lived in Boise for a number of years, I've lived here all my adult life. I remember when driving from downtown Boise to Glenwood didn't take very long at all. And I've had my eyes opened over the last 4 or 5 years to see just what was once a very short drive can take quite a bit of time. And so that's an indication of why it's so important that we look to take advantage of the space that we have, so that we can, first of all, reduce the impact on our city. I mean, one of the things that I appreciate and love about living in Boise, and I really feel it when I leave our city, when I leave our state, is the efforts that we've taken to keep it a clean place. And I'm talking about the air. So for us to reduce the need for folks to travel long distances, and keep our air clean, preserve our natural resources, not have to expend so much money on gasoline and all that. I think all of those things intersect. You can't have housing without taking into consideration transportation. And the more densely we build, the less of an impact on our roads that we have.
And kind of switching gears here, Evangelina in Parma asked, are the seniors given housing vouchers so they can continue to stay in their homes regardless of the price hike? Is this an option for them? Just to do a quick plug, that we just did a story on seniors renting on a fixed income, so you can find that at idahostatesman.com. But Deanna, since it's about vouchers, maybe you could take that one first.
Sure. It's a great question, and that particular article led me to reach out to that particular senior, and we're working to try to get some of the emergency rental assistance funds to her to at least help her save some rent money for an inevitable move she'll need to be making because of the rent increases. The voucher program is one that is based on when our waiting list is open and who applies for assistance. We used to have an open waiting list until we got up to around 7,500, 8,000 families on the list and a 5 to 7 year wait time. So now we do a lottery system about once every year, year and a half, maybe 2 years, depending on how long it takes us to work through our list. We open the waiting list for a number of weeks, and we collect names, and then a computer program sorts those, kind of like in a big bingo thing, if you picture that, draws the numbers and places them in order. So if a senior has applied and is receiving a voucher from us, and let's say they want to stay where they are, and we then just come in and help pay the rent, the landlord's willing to keep the rent at a level that a voucher will support. That's the best possible scenario, is to have people lease in place. But they have to have gone through the process of receiving approval for use of a voucher or having a voucher assigned to them. We do own and manage a number of apartment complexes, 3 of which are designated for people who are elderly and or disabled. And the assistance works the same, except for when the person moves out, they cannot take the assistance with them. If they have a voucher, it's portable, meaning they can take it not only anywhere in our jurisdiction, but they can actually move. Maybe they have family in Iowa. As long as there's a housing authority there, we can port that voucher with that family, and that housing authority then takes over administering that voucher either on our behalf or they absorb it into their program. So long answer to the question. So it's really dependent upon somebody getting on our waiting list, and then the other benchmarks that need to be met in order for somebody to stay where they are.
Okay, and we have another question from Candy in Boise. They asked, why can't people who have the space and facilities rent to RV owners who don't have a place to park their RV? We have an acre and rented to several RV owners for a short period, and it worked out very well. Seems like a win-win, at least on a temporary basis, until this housing crisis improves. So yeah, I guess, we've also heard about alternative housing, people living in their cars, RVs. So yeah, what are the options for them? Maybe Lisa or Deanna, whoever wants to take it.
So this does have to do with the land use and zoning regulations. So RV parks and mobile home parks, they're tough. And the lot rent on these spaces has also been exorbitantly increasing, leaving people in a really tough spot. So that's a great question. And it's perfect timing as we are redoing our zoning code.
And I would just add, I think it would need to be something the county would be willing to take up as well, because I know we've worked with a number of people who the owner of the property gave them permission to park on their land, and then zoning officials showed up and said, you can't do this. So if there were some temporary willingness to sort of lift some of those restrictions, I think in this time and place, they would be worth taking a look at.
Okay, and then we have another one from Nick, who lives in the West Bench in Boise, and maybe Deanna, you have these numbers or just could answer this, but he asked, what is the projected low-income housing need over the next 10 years? Numbers on that?
I've got that.
Okay.
So, to not only meet growth, but also to ensure that we respond to residents who are housing cost burdened or experiencing homelessness, the city needs 21,450 affordable homes for households earning 80% or below the area median income in the next 10 years. So our housing needs analysis breaks down the need by income level for units needed each year to meet this need. And note again that the bulk of the need is for deeply affordable homes at 60% AMI and below. And I think we provided a graphic. I'm not sure if you're able to show it or not, but there it is. And the city, that's what we're focusing on, is the folks who are the most at need, because, what we have right now, especially as it affects renters, is unfettered rental rates. Right now there is nothing stopping a property owner, a landlord from, raising their rent, at an exorbitant amount. I follow a Facebook page called Boise Renters United, and it's quite shocking when we see folks get on that page and, with a lot of desperation and shock, announcing that their landlord has all of a sudden raised their rent by $700. I saw one like that recently. And I think a lot of people are taken aback that there is no legislation preventing a rental rate increase that is so high, and also giving folks not a lot of time to address the situation. Thank goodness we do have agencies and organizations like Boise Housing Authority, Ada Housing Authority, and also nonprofits like Jesse Tree, which helps folks to avoid falling into homelessness. But that is an issue. Folks don't know it's a very volatile situation to be a renter. Yes, I completely understand that property owners, residential property owners, are feeling an unfair burden with their property taxes because commercial doesn't pay its fair share and is not forthcoming with information so that it can be assessed at the same rate that residential property is assessed. But renters really have been, I'd say, more than nickeled and dimed to death during this housing crisis.
And I would just want to add, segue to that last sentence that Councilmember Sanchez just said. Not only are we seeing rents jump by $300, $400, $500, maybe even $700 with a 30-day notice, we are also seeing, especially some of the investor buyers of multifamily housing and rental housing in general, tacking on additional fees like administrative processing fees. If you want parking, that's an additional fee sometimes. There's the fee for internet access because they're requiring payments to be made via the internet. We had one situation with an apartment complex that was charging an extra fee to people, and they thought that was buying them renter's insurance. It actually was just protecting the owner in the event of a fire or a catastrophe. It did nothing for the tenants, even though the tenants thought they were paying to have renter's insurance, and they didn't know until there'd been a fire that that did not apply to their personal family situations. So the nickel and diming above and beyond the $300, $400, $500 rent increase adds another layer of just oppressive assault on many of our rental families. The other thing I wanted to mention was in our Section 8 program, where we help about 2,500 families every month, we're required to help. So when we're looking at our list, 75% of the people we pull from our waiting list have to be at 30% of median income and below. So that's really households that are maybe just living on Social Security disability, or their Social Security because they've aged to the point that they're eligible for that. So that makes sense that we would want to target the lowest income. The bad news is we never have to try to get to that 75%. That's an easy benchmark to meet, meaning there are so many people that are just barely surviving that we're helping, that we meet that 75% without really even paying attention to that benchmark for ourselves.
Deanna, the folks that you help with the vouchers and such, that's once they've secured housing, correct? So is it up to them to go through the gauntlet of rental applications and rental application fees before they're able to get access to the resources that you provide?
Yeah, there's a little difference between our voucher program and then the emergency rental assistance program. The emergency rental assistance program, we cannot help unless the family's already in a lease, a written lease arrangement. On the voucher side, the dollar value they have with them when they're applying for housing. And so one thing that we would like for landlords to do when they're, sometimes they'll say, I want 2 or 3 times the amount of income to the rent, is count the value of the voucher as the income. But yes, the application fees, and as you well know, the lower the income of the family who's searching for housing, the more times they have to apply to find somebody to rent to them. And so if they're paying $45 per adult, $25 even per adult, and they have to apply at 40 places, then too often when somebody accepts them, now they don't have their portion of the rent to pay because they paid it out in the application fees.
Thank you, Deanna.
As we're on that topic, I kind of wanted to jump to a question from Kathy in Boise. And this caught my eye. She asked, what is the barrier to enacting a provision that landlords can't discriminate based on source of income? You know, Deanna, you were just mentioning people with vouchers, low income, you know, you have to apply multiple places. And I know some states have that source of income discrimination in their housing, you know, in their statutes. So yeah, what's kind of stopping us and what would need to be done to get that in Idaho?
Great question. And what I worry about is that we pass something like that and we think it's going to help more than it actually does. Because what we see is landlords finding other reasons not to rent to a household that has subsidy. Certainly it would be an added tool and it would help some, but it would have to pass at the state level where there has been a real unwillingness to add anything to our very paltry landlord-tenant law in the state of Idaho. So it's really, you know, quite a free-for-all. Other states have property managers have to have some kind of a license or certification, like barbers do. Here, that's not even considered. And so the standards of conduct are not there unless the entity is already has some integrity about the way they do business.
Yeah, it's you know, when we worked on that rental application fee ordinance in 2019, I had no idea it wasn't just a matter of passing an ordinance to protect our renters at the application phase. For the last few years, it has also involved protecting the one ordinance that exists in the entire state of Idaho. There is no other municipality that has adopted a rental application fee ordinance. Nevertheless, we've had Idaho state legislators work to remove just that one piece of legislation that protects our renters at that phase. And that is the environment in which we're trying to do this work to protect the interests of our renters, who are a growing segment of our community here in Boise. You know, when I campaigned for re-election to city council this past year, I was shocked at the number of renters that I met in neighborhoods where I wasn't expecting to meet renters, but there has been a lot of out-of-state investors who have purchased homes, single-family homes in Boise, and are now renting them to folks. So, you know, that is the environment we're working as we're trying to be thoughtful about the work that we do on behalf of renters and what we do in terms of ordinances at the city of Boise, being ever mindful of the likelihood that someone at the state house is going to try to preempt our work. Very necessary work for our renters.
Online.
Okay, Clay, welcome back. Since we have about 5 minutes left, I just wanted maybe everyone to say one last thing. What, you know, where do we start? You know, we've talked about, you know, how multifaceted this problem is, but, you know, what is the first thing that we can do on any level? Clay, let's start with you.
Yeah, first of all, I apologize to everyone. I have no idea what's going on. I thought I had the latest and greatest fiber network in my building, but something went amiss. I think I said it earlier. I think our local agencies and I think our local communities understand the gravity of the problem, and I think they're doing all that they are able to address it properly. I think what we need to do first is enlist the state of Idaho and the legislature to provide us and enable legislation that allows us to solve our local problems locally. They like to think that they want to control what happens locally. And for a governing body that preaches about minimal government, it's very disappointing to see them restrict our ability, whether it's the county or the city, or even highway districts, to do things the way they want to and allow them to fund it the way they see fit.
Okay, Lisa, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Quite honestly, I think we're at a point where we need everyone at the table, everyone at the decision-making table. I am the only renter on the Boise City Council, and I know that typically when it comes to housing issues, renters are not at the decision-making table. It is imperative that we have people from lived experiences, from different lived experiences in the rooms where decisions are being made. And so I believe it's a cultural shift that needs to take place. I was rather naive when I was elected to the Boise City Council 5 years ago. I didn't realize how much hatred there was against renters, as if we are second-class citizens, and we're not. We're people who operate at all levels of society. Like I said, we're getting to the point where I think half of the people who live in Boise are renters. And so we need more renters to run for office. We need them to serve on commissions. We need them to be a part of this process because we are very much affected, especially now where we are targeted for exploitation. And it's important for our voices to be heard.
And I would disagree with both, but I would also add just a little story from my own personal life experience in this last year and what it's taught me. My daughter is battling a life-threatening condition that carries with it prescription costs that insurance won't fully cover, and have meant that I've needed to come up with thousands and thousands of dollars each month to get her the medication she needs to survive. And what that has done to me and for me, a person who has a decent job and a decent income in my job, is to begin to really internalize what it's like to live life in that fight or flight mode all the time. That when the wind starts blowing, I start thinking about a tree I'm worried about in my backyard, and what if it falls over? And there are costs that insurance doesn't cover. What if my car breaks down? I mean, there's all of the survival instincts kick in, but that also means they crowd out the living and thriving part of focus on in life. And so it's been a hard but good lesson for me to be reminded of what it's like to live a life without enough, and what that means when you need to make choices about costs you didn't anticipate coming in, and what it does to your brain when you are in that close to panic mode about how am I going to cover this, and what are my options, what that does to your ability to even think clearly about everyday issues. And I see that in the people that we serve. When they are struggling so hard, they can't pick their head up. It's hard for them to advocate for themselves because their stress level is so high, and their fear level is so high, and their loss of hope runs so deep that like Lisa said, we need room for everybody at the table, but we need to be willing to listen to the real life stories and have some compassion for that as a society. This is supposed to be, a government by, for, and of the people, and it needs to be for all.
Hear, hear, Deanna. We need more compassion. We need more of that Boise kindness to be a thread that runs through everything we do in our city. Not just letting somebody merge into traffic. It needs to be a part of the way we do business in Boise.
Well, thank you all. Boise City Council member Lisa Sanchez, Clay Carley, and Deanna Watson for sharing your ideas on possible solutions to this crisis, and hopefully opening people's eyes that this exists and people are struggling out there. So my name is Rachel Spacek again, government reporter for The Statesman, and we are continuing our series on affordable housing, and you can follow along by subscribing to The Statesman at idahostatesman.com/subscribe. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you for shining a light.